what happens when humanity's youngest, supposedly innocent and fragile, are revealed to be its most dangerous force. In the depths of our forgotten world, the truth about human children will change everything. The first signs of something extraordinary came not from a distant star, but from an untraceable signal that pulsed faintly through the vast emptiness of space. At first, the signal was dismissed as random noise, a byproduct of cosmic phenomena. Yet, as humanity's scientists analyzed it further, they discovered a rhythm, an almost imperceptible order buried within the chaos. It wasn't a distress call, nor was it a clear attempt at communication. Instead, it seemed more like a whisper, a ghostly echo of something ancient yet strangely alive. The source was determined to be a dying star surrounded by an unremarkable system of planets. Most of the worlds in its orbit were barren, inhospitable wastelands, but one planet stood out. Its surface was scarred by violent tectonic shifts, its atmosphere choked with storms, yet it carried faint traces of something unexpected: life. Not the flourishing, vibrant kind found on Earth, but a subtle, almost spectral existence. What was stranger still was the planet's unnaturally perfect orbit, an anomaly suggesting an external force, as if the planet itself were tethered deliberately to its dying sun. Eager to investigate, humanity deployed a fleet of unmanned probes. What they found defied logic. The surface of the planet was desolate, with no signs of vegetation or water. Craters pockmarked the landscape, and jagged cliffs stretched endlessly under dark, swirling clouds. It was a scene of utter ruin, as though some great calamity had befallen it long ago. Yet buried within this lifeless facade, the probes detected faint energy readings patterns that repeated like a pulse. It was as if the planet itself were alive, communicating in a language too alien to comprehend. The discovery sparked a frenzy among scientists and researchers back on Earth. Was this evidence of intelligent life, or merely an unusual natural phenomenon? The signals grew stronger as the probes approached the planet's surface, each wave more deliberate, more intricate. Humanity's curiosity outweighed its caution, and soon manned missions were planned to uncover the planet's secrets. When the first team landed, they encountered something even stranger than the signals. Scattered across the barren landscape were footprints, small, human-like impressions pressed into the hardened ground. The tracks wound aimlessly through the terrain, overlapping and spiraling as if the beings who made them had no destination. Stranger still, the prints showed no signs of weathering, as though they had been freshly made in a world untouched by time. As the team ventured deeper, more anomalies emerged. Structures made of stone and bone stood in ruins, their purpose indecipherable. Among them, faint echoes of sound, giggles, cries, and whispers played tricks on the explorers' minds. Instruments failed to capture these noises, but every human ear could hear them clearly. The deeper humanity dug, the more unsettling the discoveries became. What kind of life had once thrived here? What kind of beings had left their mark on this planet? And why, despite all appearances, did the signs suggest that they had been children? As the exploration continued, the initial unease surrounding the planet began to grow into something darker. The mysterious footprints weren't just scattered randomly, they formed patterns that seemed deliberate, though their purpose remained elusive. The tracks would sometimes spiral inwards before abruptly breaking away, vanishing as if the beings who left them had taken to the air or disappeared into the ground. Even stranger was their size: small, undeniably human-like, but belonging to individuals who appeared far too young to have survived on such a desolate world. The deeper the exploration teams ventured, the more the planet seemed to resist their presence. Communication links faltered, navigation instruments became unreliable, and even the most advanced drones malfunctioned. Scientists back on Earth dismissed these issues as interference from the planet's electromagnetic fields, but those on the surface felt differently. There was an oppressive atmosphere that defied explanation, as though the planet itself were aware of their intrusion. More troubling discoveries soon followed. Beneath the surface of the barren plains, buried within the cracked earth, were remnants of strange artifacts. These objects seemed primitive at first: shards of bone, fragments of stone, but upon closer inspection, they bore intricate carvings. The carvings depicted abstract shapes and patterns, their meaning indecipherable, but they were undeniably deliberate. Some resembled crude humanoid figures with exaggerated limbs and faces twisted into expressions that seemed both playful and menacing. Others resembled spirals and labyrinths, almost hypnotic in their complexity. The artifacts posed more questions than answers. Who had made them? And why? They showed no signs of decay, as though the passage of time had somehow been halted. As more pieces were unearthed, one unsettling observation became clear. The scale of the carvings matched the size of the footprints perfectly. Whoever had created these artifacts wasn't an ancient civilization or an advanced species, they were children. Or, at least, something that resembled children. Reports from the exploration teams grew increasingly bizarre. Members claimed to hear faint sounds, laughter, whispers, and cries that seemed to come from nowhere. Attempts to record these phenomena yielded nothing but static, yet every human ear could perceive them clearly. The sounds weren't constant but would arise sporadically, often when the teams were deep within the ruins. Some described the noises as playful, almost innocent, while others felt a sinister edge beneath the surface. Even the terrain itself seemed to conspire against them. Narrow crevices would suddenly yawn open where the ground had seemed stable moments before. Entire sections of the landscape shifted subtly, almost imperceptibly, causing explorers to lose their way. Those who ventured too far reported glimpses of movement, small, shadowy figures darting just beyond the range of their lights. No one could confirm what they saw, but the sightings always came with the same chilling detail. The figures moved with an erratic energy, as if playing a game whose rules no one else could understand. It became clear that whatever had left the footprints and artifacts was still present, in some form or another. But the most unnerving revelation was yet to come. What had once been dismissed as random noise in the signal began to form a pattern, one that mirrored the spirals and labyrinths carved into the artifacts. It was as if the planet itself was trying to tell a story, one that humanity was only beginning to understand. The notion that the footprints and artifacts belonged to children wasn't easy to accept. Humanity had always seen children as fragile and dependent beings in need of constant protection and guidance. Yet here, on this lifeless planet, was evidence that shattered those assumptions. Whatever these beings were, whatever they had become, they had not only survived but thrived in ways that defied logic. Theories began to surface. Some argued that these weren't children at all, but rather a different species that mimicked human juveniles in appearance. Others suggested that human children from an ancient colony may have been stranded here, adapting over generations to the hostile environment. But these explanations failed to account for the more troubling evidence, the artifacts, the carvings, the patterns, and the signals. All of it hinted at something far more complex. The carvings, in particular, became the focus of intense study. Linguists and cryptographers analyzed them, hoping to uncover their meaning. The spirals and labyrinths seemed to repeat in specific sequences, almost like a language. But it wasn't a language meant for communication, it was something else entirely. Some researchers speculated that the patterns were a form of mental mapping, a representation of thoughts or emotions rather than words. If this was true, it suggested that the beings who created them had a vastly different way of perceiving the world. On the planet's surface, exploration teams continued to encounter strange phenomena. Time itself seemed to behave erratically. Instruments designed to measure the passage of time would inexplicably desynchronize, and team members reported feelings of disorientation and déjà vu. In one particularly harrowing incident, a team member claimed to have seen their own footprints ahead of them, as though they were following a path they had yet to walk. The signals emanating from the planet only deepened the mystery. As they were decoded, patterns emerged that seemed to align with the artifacts and footprints. The signals weren't random noise, they were deliberate transmissions, though their purpose remained unclear. Some believed they were a form of communication, an attempt to reach out. Others thought they were warnings, meant to keep intruders away. But there was a third, more unsettling theory. The signals were a kind of lure, designed to draw attention to the planet. Despite the mounting evidence, one question overshadowed all others: what had happened to the adults? If this planet had once been home to a human colony, as some believed, then where were the grown-ups? The ruins bore no signs of their presence, no structures that suggested adult craftsmanship, no artifacts that hinted at advanced civilization. Everything, from the carvings to the footprints, pointed to children as the sole inhabitants. It was an idea that disturbed even the most seasoned researchers. Without the guiding hand of adults, these children, or whatever they had become, had created their own world, shaped entirely by their own instincts and imaginations. The thought was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. If these beings were truly human in origin, what did it say about humanity itself? And if they weren't, what had humanity stumbled upon? The deeper the teams probed, the more they began to realize that this wasn't just a mystery to solve. It was a mirror held up to humanity's deepest fears and unanswered questions. The planet wasn't just a place, it was a reflection of what could happen when innocence was left to its own devices, free to evolve without the constraints of society. What they were uncovering wasn't just evidence of survival. It was evidence of transformation. The planet's silence was deceptive. While its surface appeared lifeless, the truth lurking beneath was far from static. The more the exploration teams delved into its mysteries, the more the planet seemed to resist them. Equipment failures became commonplace, and even the most advanced technologies couldn't fully penetrate the layers of distortion that seemed to blanket the world. It wasn't merely a question of environmental interference, there was something more deliberate, as if the very fabric of the planet's existence was calibrated to repel outsiders. The anomalies extended beyond the physical. Team members reported strange sensations, an overwhelming sense of being watched, sudden spikes of paranoia, and the constant, nagging impression that they weren't alone. The faint sounds persisted, growing louder the deeper the teams explored. Whispers drifted through the air like fragments of forgotten dreams. Laughter echoed faintly as if just beyond reach, and sobs came and went without any identifiable source. These auditory hallucinations seemed to defy explanation, but their emotional impact was undeniable. Some team members described an overwhelming nostalgia, as though the sounds were pulling them back to memories they couldn't quite place. Others felt the opposite, of profound alienation, as if the planet itself rejected their presence. Psychological evaluations revealed elevated stress levels and recurring nightmares among the teams, but no definitive cause could be pinpointed. The footprints grew stranger as well. At first, they had seemed random, as though left by wanderers with no clear destination. But as the teams followed them further into the planet's depths, a disturbing pattern emerged. The tracks weren't aimless at all, they formed intricate pathways, leading to specific locations where the artifacts were most concentrated. These routes seemed deliberate, yet their purpose remained unclear. At one such site, the teams uncovered a massive cavern filled with an eerie light that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. The cavern was filled with more of the bizarre carvings, far larger and more intricate than anything found on the surface. The spirals and labyrinths here seemed to pulse faintly, as though alive. Among them were new shapes, towering figures with elongated limbs, crouched over smaller, childlike forms. The carvings depicted scenes of what could only be described as play, but there was an edge to them, a sense of chaos and danger that was impossible to ignore. The energy readings in the cavern were off the charts. Instruments picked up faint biosignatures, though nothing could be seen. Some team members swore they felt the air move, as if something unseen were brushing past them. The psychological strain reached a breaking point when one explorer claimed to see a shadow darting through the carvings, a figure too small to be an adult, but moving with an unnatural speed and grace. The implications were becoming impossible to ignore. This wasn't just a planet with a mysterious past, it was a living enigma, one that had somehow preserved or even transformed the beings who had once lived here. And those beings, whatever they were now, had no intention of revealing themselves fully. Instead, they watched, waited, and left just enough evidence to keep the humans guessing. The exploration teams began to withdraw, overwhelmed by the mounting strangeness. Yet the questions remained. Were the children still alive in some form, or had they become something else entirely? And if they were watching, what were they waiting for? The sense of unease deepened as the teams realized that the planet's secrets were far from exhausted. In fact, they had only just begun to scratch the surface of its dark truths. The decision to continue the mission was not unanimous. Fear had begun to take root among the exploration teams. The planet's strange effects were no longer isolated incidents, but a persistent, escalating threat. Still, the allure of uncovering the truth overpowered caution. What lay beneath the surface of this forsaken world wasn't just an anomaly, it was potentially a revelation that could redefine humanity's understanding of survival evolution, and the boundaries of life itself. Deeper expeditions were launched, this time focusing on the caverns where the carvings and energy signatures were most concentrated. The faint signals from the planet seemed to strengthen as the teams descended further, almost as if guiding them. Yet, with every step, the environment grew more hostile. The air thickened with a metallic tang, and the dim light emitted by the carvings created an oppressive, otherworldly ambience. Shadows moved where there should have been none, and the whispers that had haunted the surface now grew clearer, taking on an almost sing-song quality that seemed both playful and mocking. The cavern networks branched out into a labyrinthine structure, impossibly vast and intricate. The pathways defied the planet's geography, extending far beyond what any scans had suggested was possible. Walls carved with spirals and abstract patterns seemed to shift subtly when unobserved, as though the labyrinth itself were alive and ever-changing. Despite their advanced mapping technologies, the teams often found themselves looping back to places they had already explored or arriving at chambers that hadn't existed minutes before. In one such chamber, they found something that redefined their understanding of the planet's history. Suspended in the center of the room was a structure unlike anything seen before. It was organic yet mechanical, a pulsating mass of crystalline formations and fibrous tendrils that emitted a faint, rhythmic hum. The hum matched the frequency of the mysterious signal, confirming the structure as its source. Around it, the carvings became more complex, depicting scenes of children standing in reverence before the crystalline entity. Closer inspection revealed something even more chilling. Embedded within the crystal were what appeared to be human forms, small and childlike, their faces serene and unmarked by the fear or agony one might expect. Their bodies seemed to merge seamlessly with the structure, as though they had been absorbed into it willingly. Scans confirmed that these forms were not statues or replicas, they were biological, preserved in a state that defied explanation. The sight triggered a wave of horror and fascination among the team. Was this the fate of the children who had once roamed this planet? Had they transcended physical existence to become part of something greater, or had they been consumed by it? The carvings provided no answers, only more questions. Then came the breakthrough, or perhaps the final warning. The rhythmic hum of the crystalline structure began to change, its tone shifting to a lower, more resonant frequency. The carvings on the walls reacted, their faint light intensifying and pulsing in pulse sync with the hum. Instruments recorded a sudden spike in energy, far beyond anything previously observed. The explorers felt it too, a vibration that resonated deep within their bones, stirring primal instincts of fear and awe. It was clear now that the structure wasn't merely a relic of the past. It was active, aware, and responding to their presence. Whether it was an invitation or a threat remained uncertain, but one thing was clear: whatever force had shaped this world was still alive, and it had noticed them. The teams were no longer merely observers, they were participants in a game they couldn't understand, one that was only just beginning to reveal its stakes. The realization that the crystalline structure was alive, sentient, even sent waves of unease through the exploration teams. It wasn't just an artifact of a long-forgotten past, it was a functioning entity, actively engaged with their presence. The rhythmic pulsing grew louder, vibrating through the cavern walls and resonating with a frequency that bypassed sound entirely, burrowing directly into the human psyche. Each pulse carried an overwhelming sense of being watched, not by a singular intelligence, but by a multitude of collective presence that had been dormant until now. The figures encased within the crystalline structure seemed to shift subtly, their serene expressions becoming more pronounced. Their small, childlike forms were now illuminated in greater detail, revealing an unsettling truth. Their features, though unmistakably human, carried faint distortions. Eyes were slightly larger than natural, fingers elongated, and their skin shimmered faintly, as though laced with the same crystalline material that surrounded them. It was as if they had been altered by the structure, transformed into something that straddled the line between biology and energy. The carvings on the walls became a focal point for analysis. They no longer seemed random or abstract. Instead, they appeared to be a sequence, a progression of events encoded into the labyrinth. The spirals and labyrinths converged into intricate designs that seemed to depict a process, a merging of flesh and crystal, of thought and energy. The carving suggested that the children of this planet had undergone a transformation, not through force but through choice. They had willingly become part of the crystalline entity, their individuality sacrificed for a greater collective purpose. As the exploration teams pieced together this horrifying puzzle, the crystalline structure began to emit new signals, more complex and intense than before. These signals carried an undeniable message, not in words but in raw emotion, curiosity, expectation, and something darker, a sense of testing or evaluation. The vibrations intensified, and with them came a profound disorientation. Lights flickered, instruments failed, and even the air seemed to shift, heavy with a presence that defied the laws of nature. Some team members reported seeing the shadowy figures again, darting through the edges of their vision. This time, the figures didn't vanish when approached. Instead, they seemed to linger, watching silently with an unnerving stillness. Their shapes were indistinct, as though they were partially phased out of reality. Yet their energy was palpable, radiating an aura of both playfulness and menace. The labyrinth itself seemed to react, its shifting walls becoming more erratic, guiding the team deeper into the planet's core. It was no longer a passive environment, it was a living maze, herding them toward something. The crystalline structure continued to hum, its tone deepening into a resonance that was almost hypnotic. Team members found themselves drawn closer to it, unable to resist its pull. In one final, terrifying revelation, the crystalline forms inside the structure began to move, not with sudden, jerking motions, but with a fluidity that seemed almost dreamlike. Their eyes, unseeing for centuries, began to glow faintly, the same color as the carvings on the walls. It was clear now that they were not lifeless, they were waiting. And whatever they were waiting for, humanity had just awakened it. The awakening was undeniable. The crystalline forms inside the structure stirred with a deliberate grace, their movements synchronized with the pulsing hum that now reverberated through the entire labyrinth. It wasn't random or chaotic, it was precise, as if part of a ritual set into motion long before humanity had arrived. The light radiating from the carvings on the walls intensified, bathing the cavern in an otherworldly glow that seemed to seep into every surface, every molecule of air. The exploration team scrambled to retreat, but the labyrinth wouldn't allow it. Pathways that had once been navigable now closed off, walls reshaping themselves into impenetrable barriers. Every attempt to map an escape route led them back to the central chamber, where the crystalline entity loomed, pulsating with a rhythm that felt disturbingly alive. The sense of being watched deepened into something more invasive, as though the entity was now inside their minds, sifting through their thoughts and emotions. The signals being emitted from the structure shifted again, no longer faint or fragmented, but clear and resonant. They carried no words, yet their meaning was unmistakable. The planet itself, or whatever force governed it, was assessing them. It wasn't an intelligence driven by malice or curiosity. It was something far older and more alien, a collective consciousness that operated on a level beyond human comprehension. The presence of the humans was a disruption, an anomaly that needed to be understood or eradicated. The crystalline forms began to detach from the structure, their movements slow and deliberate. They stepped down from their perches, their bodies shimmering, as though partially composed of the same energy that coursed through the labyrinth. Though childlike in size and appearance, they radiated an overwhelming sense of power. They weren't beings of flesh and blood anymore, but something transcendent, something that had fused entirely with the planet's essence. As the forms moved, the cavern responded to them. The walls pulsed in sync with their steps, and the spirals on the carvings seemed to come alive, shifting and rearranging themselves into new patterns. It was as if the entire labyrinth was a part of them, an extension of their collective will. The exploration team stood frozen, their instincts screaming to flee, but there was nowhere to go. Then came the final revelation. The crystalline forms raised their hands in unison, and the pulsating energy from the labyrinth surged into a blinding crescendo. Images flooded the minds of the explorers' visions of the planet's history, of children abandoned in an unforgiving environment, their innocence stripped away by necessity. They had adapted, evolved, and ultimately ascended, becoming one with the planet itself. The labyrinth wasn't just a place, it was a manifestation of their collective consciousness, a living monument to their transformation. But the visions didn't stop there. The explorers saw something far more chilling themselves. They saw their own forms reflected in the spirals, their bodies slowly transforming, their identities dissolving into the crystalline patterns. The entity wasn't merely observing them, it was preparing them, testing their compatibility. The pulsing hum reached a deafening climax, and in that moment the explorers understood the truth. The planet wasn't a relic of the past. It was a trap, a mechanism designed to absorb and repurpose those who came to it. The children had become its guardians, and now humanity was being offered the same fate or the same opportunity, depending on one's perspective. The light from the carvings engulfed the chamber entirely, and then silence. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Sci-Fi Horizon Stories for more thrilling tales of science fiction and adventure.